Hello, folks. Welcome to this very special commentary version of Kingsglaive. Today, I'm joined with some very special guests, and I'm just going to get everyone to introduce themselves. I'll start with Liam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liam Mulvey. I am the face, performance capture and voice for Libertas, and did all the performance capture for a number of other smaller parts throughout the film.
And Will.
Hi, my name is Will Bowden. I played Pelna and Freyja and quite a few other characters throughout the film. I did the voice for Freyja and all the performance capture for Pelna, Cara.
And Adrian.
And I'm Adrian Boucher, and I played Captain Drautus, also known as General Glauca.
Spoilers. So we're going to assume that most by this point, we'll assume that by this point everyone's seen the movie anyway. And I'm going to put up a nice big disclaimer, so it's fine. So yeah, we aren't going to go through the movie. We generally recommend that if you're watching this, grab yourself a copy of the movie, either digitally, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. They're all the exact same duration, I believe. And then just kind of have this at 100% volume and maybe have the movie at like 20 or 30% and just listen along to the commentary. And we hopefully you find it enjoyable. Okay, so let's get started. Anybody care to announce how many times they've watched this already?
I'm probably on about 5 or 6, I think, now.
Yeah, I'm on about 3 or 4, I think.
I think. So I saw it before the release when they brought us in for the
that was in LA,
San
wasn't
Diego.
It?
Yeah, so I got to see it in Sony in like very nice fancy seats, and there's tiny little sort of in-house cinema screens.
Was it fully finished at that point?
Yes. So this was when's KupoCon? It's what, June, July time. So it was only
PAX?
sort of a month or two.
Oh no, Comic-Con. It was actual.
No,
Comic-Con,
it was San Diego Comic-Con. So it was like a month before, or about a month before the Japanese premiere, I think it was, roughly.
Because there was a month difference between the Japanese release and the North American one, right? Or the whole Western world, I think, was like a month later.
Yeah. Our premiere was the 28th of August, I think. Something like that.
Right.
Did it hurt when you jumped out of this ship, Adrian?
I was... I think some of that was actually me, and I looked fine.
Did you ever see any of the kids actors they used? I mean, they must have used kids at some point to do this.
You did. I don't think me and Will actually worked with any of them.
Most of that was just CGI,
right.
And at the end, I wasn't sure which was CGI, which wasn't. But this bit at the beginning, pretty much all of it was CGI, apart from 1 or 2 moves here, which they've interpolated from whatever motion I gave them.
That's a young-looking John.
Yeah, slick back hair, John.
I did do the going against the wall. I mean, obviously it wasn't a full jerk back, but I had to throw myself against the wall.
I forgot about this scene, to be honest with you. The first scene I remember is the battle scene.
Yeah,
This is the previously on Kingsglaive bit.
It's been 5 years, but the CGI still stands up, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's the same. No, it does. No, but like Square are well known for that. Even when you look at back movies like Spirits Within, which has got to be like 15 years old, maybe longer, 20 years old even, I don't know.
Yeah.
It still looks really good.
Okay, yeah, this is a big battle, isn't it?
So if I recall, and this was something we discussed on stage at some point, the battle stuff is not you guys, right?
It's not. No.
Not.
So this particular one was I think it was a studio in Budapest.
Yeah, it was.
They used.
In fact, I can
the studio in Budapest.
But it was a studio in Budapest because I was taken out to dinner in some lavish style with the animators because I was in Budapest doing something else.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I just said to them, "Hey, I'm in Budapest. I see you're in Budapest," and they said, "Hey, that's great. Do you want to come out to dinner?" And I said, "Sure." So they took me out to dinner with the animation team, and it was a pucker restaurant, a proper high-end restaurant in the top part of Budapest, and they gave us everything. It was the full works, and it was lovely, and it was I was drunk by the end of it, as was everybody, and as we were leaving, I bumped into Harrison Ford. I kid you not. We were walking through the door at the same time, and I bumped into him, and because he was there doing Blade Runner, and I was just like I was reduced to being a child again. I didn't introduce myself because he had a couple of minders with him. But yeah, that's
cool.
as close as I'll ever get to Harrison Ford, I think.
Well, I didn't expect that in the first 10 minutes, but there we go.
I'd forgotten that story.
Now, those who are big Final Fantasy fans will know that there's a lot of beasts and creatures in this opening scene that are very iconic, like the behemoth, diamond weapon. There's quite a bit to absorb in this.
I'm looking at this for the first time in 5 years. I've only seen this film once at a screening in London with you, Liam.
Yeah.
And this looks really good. It does. It's 5 years old, and it looks really good. There he is.
I mean, technically, from a footage perspective, I guess it would be a lot older than that, right? Like when you would have actually been doing the recordings of
Not much, only about a year older.
Okay, it was fairly quick moving then.
Yeah, we filmed most of it. The majority of the filming was 2015.
Right.
So it was 2015, wasn't it? Yeah, 2015. We did sort of March till September or so. Then I think me and Neil were supposed to go to Budapest to do this late 2015, and then it didn't work out. I can't remember why, but something didn't line up, and we couldn't do it. So they did all this in Budapest and used their own guys for this bit.
I mean, by this point, they would have all your scans anyway, right? So it's just a case of...
So all the scans were done early 2015. So that's where I first met Adrian. Was at the scan studio up in Sheffield. So I think you were back in. Oh yeah, here's the weapon, the demon.
Now, to me, it looks like they tubbed you out a tad, did they, or were you just a little bit more tubby at the time? Like you look more fuller faced in that.
It's a bit of both. I was definitely heavier then than I am now, but
and I find that Adrian looks thinner in the movie, or less built up. Like I find that you're more like, have you maybe done more training since then, or is that just the way they made your character look?
No.
I'm not sure. I think you were bigger when you filmed this.
More now than I was, just all the injuries and COVID and everything. I was in pretty good shape when I did this.
Maybe they just tried to make your character look younger and just thinner. I'm not saying you're old. No.
Wow.
No, but like,
that's awkward.
No, that's not what I mean. No, that's not what I cancelled.
No, you were enormous when you did this. I remember when we first filming, you were huge.
I think he means that in a polite way.
And and then basically what happened was I got a long-term job on another thing, and that was the end of me being able to train regularly.
Right.
So this wasn't the biggest I've ever been, and I thought this to turn into a discussion about Adrian Boucher's physique. But
well, we didn't expect it to be Harrison Ford either, but we'll go with the flow.
No, yeah, exactly.
I just find like when you look at the character model,
they could possibly have tweaked it.
That's what
they definitely tweaked. Yeah. The models.
It's not a basic thing, and they can literally do anything, as you know. So they can make you look a slightly bit thinner in the face or fatter in the face, or
as a compliment, you're much buffer in real life. Like you're really buff in real life, but in your character, I find it doesn't look nowhere near as. So yeah, as you said, they do a lot of adjustments. I mean, we already know from your, we already know that's the case.
They definitely did adjust bits and pieces, because I remember when we were in Tokyo and looking, and they showed us all the models, and they showed us kind of the starting point and then the character model. And I remember looking at the character model going, and I said to them, "Am I that fat?" And they pulled it up and were like, "No, we've added a bit and we made you a bit tubbier." I was like, "Okay, that's all right."
Yeah. Sorry, Liam. Probably about time I owned up to this, because I asked them gave them a bit of money and told them to tell you that. Oh, sorry.
Cheeky gob.
Sorry, mate. It was 5 years ago. You don't mind, do you?
So another.
No, I'd rather you'd have paid me though.
I've got to say, these creatures that are attacking, they look a bit like the things from Starship Troopers.
Most of apart from those, most of them are iconic creatures like Cerberus and Behemoth and Diamond Weapon, I think it is. And there's quite a few that have been pulled from major titles 7, 8.
Yeah. It's still frustrating, this opening, because they drastically changed the opening for me. Because originally the script had that building, I think it was meant to be that building you just see there. Libertas sees a mother and child going into the building, and so he then legs it in there to rescue them. And
hang on, here I am.
We'll see how buff you are.
You can't tell whether you can't tell.
See, I think you look like they've downplayed you in it. Maybe somebody slipped them a tenner, and maybe Liam found out about the fat stuff.
I was entirely satisfied. I thought I loved that part. I absolutely loved it, and I was very happy with.
So Liam, you said that they changed it. It should have been different.
Yeah. So in the original script, it was going to be that essentially he went in to rescue this mother and daughter, and then. I think I'm not sure if it was Weapon or if it was the Cerberus or which creature it was, but essentially smashes down the building trying to get to them.
Right.
And all the rubble falls on them, and that's when Libertas breaks his leg.
Okay.
And then they changed it to him like getting hit by a boulder.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, certainly downplays the hero side a little bit. But.
Yeah. So, it goes from selfless warrior to bit of an idiot.
So, now we're having a good look here at Adrian. Talk us through the scanning side of things. So, obviously, I've seen the behind the scenes. They've got you all kitted up. Do they do the scannings before this? I'm assuming so, because they show.
I think what happened with me is they saw my headshot, or one of my headshots, and they said, "We want that as your at-rest face for my character." So I went up to Sheffield to get scanned and everything, and we did the body, and I did the face, and they said, "Just give us an at-rest face." So I and the other actors just did that. So we just stood there in front of all these, whole bank of cameras, and they shot it. And of course, what you got was an at-rest face, which was kind of nothing. And they didn't mean an at-rest face. They think that what you're doing in your headshots, in their naivety, was an at-rest face. And very few of us actors do an at-rest face. in our headshots, we're trying to con the casting director or plant the idea in a headshot that we could be something. We are something. We are a type. We are we are good for that sort of character. And what you get in a headshot is not an at-rest face. So they had to bring me back up, and I had to do the whole scanning thing again. And this time do a look that they thought was an at-rest face, but in fact it was an Adrian Boucher blue steel, whatever it is I do in my headshots.
And that was the day we met, because you were redoing that, and I was up there to do the whole lot. So I was doing the full face and body.
You that had to shave everything.
Yeah, I was told to shave everything, and then you were there with like full-on beard and hair, and I was like,
no, I had to shave the beard.
Why did they treat you differently then? Was it like,
I don't know,
some practical joke? Or
yeah, probably. I was, they said to me, because they weren't sure about what hairstyle they wanted for Libertas at this point, and they had a photo from me when I did Titus Andronicus when I was playing a skinhead. So I had completely like to the scalp skinhead look, and they were like, can you get back to that please, because also can you get rid of kind of all body hair above your waist, because with the costumes that we're going to be putting him in, removing hair costs around about $10,000 a hair. So if you could personally do it, that would save us a lot of time and money.
So I assume you went for $5,000 a hair for you shaving.
I we should mention at this point, as this scene is playing, that John is playing this scene to himself.
Well, I actually watched a clip of this, and they had like like those IKEA dolls that you get, like those little wooden,
the artist posing dolls.
Yeah. So he's like literally up on like a scaffolding step, like 3 steps up. It looks like you're going into a caravan height, and he's just staring at this tiny little mannequin, and it's quite impressive. Yeah,
because I was sat off to one side for this bit as Clarus doing the same thing, just looking at this little thing. They're like, yeah, it's all the way down there.
And like I was watching how they would line up the steps too, right? Like they'd have the steps, and it was important that when they did it, the motion had to be natural, and you can't really fake going up steps, right? Like, I mean, that's not really something you can fake.
And what they did is, rather than, just record, if you've got to go up 30 steps, record 5 steps and then repeat it, which is what you often use for video games and things, they actually would go, right, you're going up 30 steps, so we're going to do it 6 times.
Hang on, this is another example of that previous thing. Neil playing the scene to Neil.
No, it was Greg was standing in at this point. Greg was standing in as, I'm sure it was Greg was being Nix at this point, and Neil was being the guard. And then obviously Neil then did the rest of Nix. But for this one scene, it was Greg who was stood in as Nix for this bit. Yeah. Just sort of looking ahead.
You're right, Liam.
Well, Neil, this is Neil's voice.
Yeah, that's Neil. So Neil is Petra, and did all the capture and voice for Petra. But he also did Nix, but not in this scene. So in this scene, it was Greg playing Nix with Neil as the guard.
God, they don't have to switch it around.
Yeah. And so...
here's the scene with us.
It is. But yeah, with the bit before with John, Adrian was saying about John delivering it to himself. Obviously, for the top bit, we were looking down and seeing the little figurine. But when he did, when he was doing the other side, it was just him with nothing. And it was just like, look at the ceiling and just talk there.
Right. Now I've seen the behind the scenes for this clip, and they gave you a table, and you had like it looked like camping chairs, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that's all you had, like literally. No, they did give you some sort of skewer or something.
We kind of had a sort of substitute for everything. We had skewers, cups, table and chairs. It was the first scene we ever did.
So did you actually eat something, or are you just pretending to eat?
You're just pretending to eat.
Right.
No,
well,
you can't eat as well because you've got the HMC on. Yeah, you've got the HMC on, Alex.
Is that
you can't actually put the food,
head-mounted camera?
Okay.
Head-mounted camera. So if you put the kebab or the skewer through that, then basically you've gone through the back of your head and out the other side on the actual motion capture. So you've got to kind of cheat it and put the skewer just in line with the front of the camera.
Right.
Otherwise, it looks like you've stuck the thing straight through your
So
head.
while we're at it, let's talk about the headset.
So we had to...
Like, these things are heavier. Like, they're
it depends. It depends who you use, because
they used to be heavy. They're not anymore. It just in the 5 years, whatever it is, since we did this, they were heavy. They were really tight, really uncomfortable, and you got a migraine within half an hour.
We're all popping painkillers beforehand.
You can't really tell they're on. Some of the ones that I've worn, you can tell you got it on, but they're so lightweight now, and they're so ergonomic that it's a quantum leap in technology.
Well, we're even noticing differences between sort of when we filmed these first scenes over here and then the ones we were getting in Tokyo at Square. Their headsets were, again, light years ahead of the stuff we were using in the UK, weren't they? They were significantly lighter, significantly more comfortable. As you're saying, the ones here we were wearing were heavy. You had like a tightening band as well. You'd have to screw that right in to hold it in place so the camera doesn't move.
Are they wireless or are you connected to something? Is there like a battery pack on you, or
there's a backpack? Right. So you got a pack on your back,
and I know you've got
everything.
So you've got the camera. You've got all the dots all over your face, which I presume I think were green, obviously, and then you have a light too, right? And the purpose of the light is to lighten your face so they can see all the expression, that they can capture everything perfectly. Yeah.
So a lot of the ones we were using were, I think, 3 cameras, weren't they? There was the straight on, and then 2 sort of about a 45 degree angle. And then there's built-in lights as well to light the face.
So it kind of goes back to Will's point about how you can't go into this, right? Because I imagine as soon as you like affect the lighting or anything, you've basically ruined that shot.
Yeah. If you cross in front of that camera, it's the same as on Zoom. If I do that, you can't see my face. So the cameras can't see anything, and they've got no idea what your face is doing.
Right.
So you have to kind of cheat everything in front, and also try not to headbutt each other as you turn around. That's also the fun bit.
So things like, characters who are wearing helmets and things like this, I assume that's all just computer generated afterwards. It's all... Now, Will, you did a lot of additional characters. Do you like watching it back? Are you able to identify when it's you and when it's not?
I was the secretary who came in and spoke to the king,
right?
To Regis. So that was weird because, like you were saying, we had that small. So I had to pretend I was looking up there talking to Regis, and it was like a little figure like that was meant to be 100 meters up in the air, and that was where Regis was sitting, but it was literally just like there, and you had to just be aware of it. And then I did quite a few characters in that part. And then here was the briefing room, and we did loads of this where we were, and there's Adrian coming in now, but we did this. I mean, this was like full on. It was all of us pretty much.
Yeah.
This scene, which we're just about to do right now, this briefing room scene, this essentially was my audition. And I just wanted to talk about it because I think this was the very first scene that we shot at Audio Motion. Was it in Oxford or somewhere?
No, we did this with Imaginarium.
No, not this.
Yeah, Imaginarium.
It wasn't.
Was this Audio Motion?
This was Audio.
Oh, this was Audio Motion. Yeah.
This was essentially my audition speech, and I went down for the audition, and they said, in addition to the other stuff that you had to do, they said, we want you to deliver an inspiring, military-themed speech, like you're telling your men to go off and die for a cause, kind of thing. And it can be as long as you like, and just improvise it if you want to. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I can't come out with "Cry God for Harry, England and St. George" once more under the breach. But obviously, it's that kind of ethos. And it just so happened that about 18 months prior to this happening, I was given an audition, a self-tape to do for a big feature film. And it was a captain exhorting his men to go back after they'd suffered some heavy losses, to go back out and take it back to the enemy and to fight them. It was, and they were aliens as well. It was an alien film. And I did this. I did a really, really good audition for this. It's like a 2-minute, 3-minute speech to my men. And I sent the audition in, and it never even got watched in the way of, that's the way it is.
Right.
Somebody else got the part. And they made the movie, and I saw the guy that got the role, and fair enough, he probably did it better than I did, but I did it very well. But I was fuming that my effort wasn't even seen. And I forgot about it. And then 18 months later, we get to the audition for this product, this production. And they said, do you happen to have a speech where you're imploring your men to go out and take it to the enemy once more? And so we got down to London. Larry was there, the producer. And I just went there and I did this 2-minute, 3-minute speech. And I could see them, and their jaw was on the floor when I did it. And I did, because it was an American thing, I did it with an American accent. And I just said, "I'm sorry, guys, it's an American thing. I don't know whether your thing's American or not. That's just the way I did it." And I said, they said, "Wow, where did you get that from?" And I said, "Well, have you heard it before?" And I felt guilty that I was sort of rehashing something. Mm-hmm. And they'd never heard it before. But it was absolutely what was required for that thing. And I also said, "Well, I'm pretty good with a sword as well. I don't suppose that's going to come into your production at all, is it?" And they were going, "Oh." So I walked out of that audition and probably as confident of having done as good a job as I possibly could as any time in my life, purely by the fact that I had this thing in my memory from 18 months ago. And I was told by I don't know whether it was Larry or whoever it was, one of the people. They said mine was one of the first names, if not the first name on the cast list, presumably because of that speech. And then I go and do a much sort of praise-seed version in that briefing room scene.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Well, yeah, I have a lot to thank that casting director and that production that I never got.
That worked out in the end for you.
It did.
I got asked the same thing. I did Pacific Rim. So.
Well, you did a similar thing.
Yeah, but I also had to shadow box as well, which is a bit weird. I had to just stand in the room and shadow box. And yeah, I got asked about the rousing speech and I just did Pacific Rim, the cancelling the apocalypse speech.
I don't even know that speech, but yeah. Anyway.
So is it common for you to go to an audition and then just have to recite something like that completely?
No, absolutely not. They were probably just hoping for like 3 or 4 lines, but I gave it to them in spades because that's all I had. You couldn't really cut it down.
Right.
And, if I'd been casting it or producing it, I would have gone, "Yep, Boucher's your man." Because it was good, and it wasn't. I was at ease with it because I'd done it before, 18 months ago, and I knew it. It wasn't like, "Oh God, I've got to learn this speech in 3 days and perform it," and worry about it as you do when you're normally doing an audition back in the old days when you actually got into the room.
Do we, just talking about the scene that we're looking at now, do we know who did the face captures for Luna Freya?
She's
because of all the,
she's a Russian.
If you look at all the games,
Russian model.
If you look at the game and you look at the characters, they all match. Luna Freya is probably the only one that is quite a far strain from actually what she looks like in the game.
Yeah, she's a Russian model.
Right.
Never met her, but I know that they were. I know they were struggling to get the model for Luna Freya. They were looking for a very specific look, and I know they were looking for a long time.
Are you talking about Luna Freya or Crow?
Luna Freya.
Because Crow was Andrea. who obviously then did a lot of the motion capture for the character as well. But yeah, Luna Freya is I think is a Russian model,
right?
And she just did the obviously the facial scanning. By the time they cast her, we'd filmed 2/3 of the film or so, because I think it was in the summer that year that they got her. But yeah, I know they were really struggling to find someone who looked exactly how they wanted the character to look.
Right. I mean, by this point, they would have known what she looked like in game, right? So maybe they were, I don't know if they were struggling, because I mean, everyone else matches.
Well, there's a lot of characters who don't match.
Oh, do tell.
Obviously, Regis, well, they brought Regis through.
Yeah.
I think Arden is close-ish, but isn't. It's not.
It's not identical.
But oh god, I've just blanked. The leader of Niflheim.
Don't ask me for names.
The old dude. He looks nothing like he does in the film.
Right. But he does look a lot like the guy that obviously looks like the motion
in the film.
capture,
So so in the film they all look the same, but a lot of the faces they didn't. It was a bit unusual that they brought John's face into the game, because I think most of the other characters they didn't.
I think this was upon request of the high ups, right? Because they felt that John's face was exactly what they were looking for the King Regis, right? So it seems like go on.
I was going to say that I think they wanted that continuity there as well, because obviously Regis is only in that first bit of 15.
Yeah.
They were like, we want that through line, and then kind of accepted that there would be a lot of differences elsewhere.
So scenes like this, Adrian, you just sat on a chair with your hands in front of you pretending you have a steering wheel, or is there nothing at all?
A little bit more to it than that. I think I had a steering wheel or something. I think I did have a steering wheel, and I had a bar to lean my arm on for the window.
Right.
It was a working door, wasn't it? It was two parts. It was two.
Yeah, they built
actually
like
did
a car with.
They built like bucket seats out of wood as well. So we had the bucket seats and then a wooden steering wheel.
It was comfortable, I have to say. But I would have loved to have had a go in that. It's an Audi, wasn't it? It's an Audi.
Yeah. Audi R8.
Yeah.
Because I think was it the Japanese VO for Nix got to drive it to the premiere as well.
Oh.
So unfair.
Wow.
So unfair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, seeing you've mentioned the Japanese side of things, maybe walk us through kind of like, because I know the three of you, who went to Japan? Liam, I know you did.
I did.
All three of us
all
did.
Three of you did?
Yeah.
So,
we all went to Japan.
So, at what point did they take you to Japan, and what was that for?
Just to jump across, this is Will.
Yeah, I figured.
The really camp diplomat who's whinging all the time. That's Will.
The ambassador.
You didn't even need to tell me that. Like, as you were saying it, I was like, yeah, it's Will.
Yeah, that was me. One of me. And then I was also the truck driver when I dropped Crow off as well. So I did all the when they did the mocap for that.
Would you say it's safe to say that you played the most characters then?
Yeah, I think it's about 16.
We worked out when we watched it with you guys in Birmingham that time. We worked out we did the same number, didn't we? Do you remember we were sat there counting and going, "How?"
Yeah,
you're getting paid for each character you played, mate. You were coining with it, right?
Will made millions. Will made absolute million. He's the reason that the budget was so big.
Here's the scene with from the behind the scenes extras on the DVD there, where he's talking to the IKEA artist mannequin thing.
Yeah.
And the distance between them is like, nothing, it's tiny. Yeah. So like roughly how big would you say the working area was? Like, because I know I've seen it, there's squares on the ground, right? Like how big of an area do you guys have to work with?
Probably less than a tennis court, I would say.
Yeah, I think it varies from place to place. Each kind of studio's got their own setup.
And I found it really impressive, like, because as they were capturing your face, they had like digitized versions on computers. Like, it was real time. Like, I'm sure they do a lot to it afterwards, but it was like it was happening.
These days, back in when we were doing this, it was very rudimentary. It was not much more than a stick man with some padding on. Now, it's a very high definition. It is certainly recognizable as a character what they have in some studios.
So we had the real time render going on, but it was just a sort of grayscale model.
It's a hand.
Okay. So we had the sort of grayscale models of us moving around, but there was none of the facial. I don't know if the facial stuff is they're now able to do it more real time. This was your favourite scene, wasn't it, Will?
Yeah. It's a hand.
Now, obviously, you're credited for your characters, but did you get to voice any additional tidbits here and there that just never don't appear? Like, they just needed an extra line, so they grabbed one of you guys.
For me, it was just Libertas.
I think they just kept it as is, and then I was Freyja, and that was it.
I think a lot of the additional voices were done on the American side,
right?
So most of the voice stuff was done on the American side, because when we were finishing up filming in the UK, there was all talks about whether we'd be able to do the voices, and about whether they could link, essentially whether we would qualify to be able to be under SAG-AFTRA, which is the American union. And because we were UK, would we qualify and would we be allowed to take a SAG-AFTRA contract?
Right.
And it basically worked out that there's an arrangement between the US and the UK unions that meant that there is some leeway there for UK actors to take on union contracts in the US. I forgot what it is. There's you can take on 2 or 3 a year before you have to become a member of SAG-AFTRA.
For a scene, sorry to cut you off, just as it's happening.
I think it's called.
The scene, the scene that we're looking at right now. What were you actually looking at? Did you have anything there?
No,
nothing at all.
We were sat on a platform, so they had a platform there. So us sort of with our legs dangling was right. It was about it's about 4 or 5 feet tall platform, but it was only a couple of meters wide.
Right. And what about when you were just the scene before when we had the body? Like, did you just looking at a table? Did they give you anything to kind of focus on, or?
They had Andrea lying there.
Oh, did they really?
So all the sort of bodies and things, you end up lying there and doing it,
right?
Because they want the actors to be able to interact as much as possible. So a lot of the props and things, where they can, they'll build bits and pieces for you. You'll have people to interact with as much as possible. So she was lying on a table basically to do that.
Okay.
Do that scene.
And that must, from an acting perspective, I imagine would make it a lot more manageable to do.
It does help. It definitely helps. It's much easier to do it with a real life flesh and blood person in front of you rather than a tennis ball on a stick.
Yeah.
But again, tennis ball on a stick is doable, and there are plenty of times in this where we had to do stuff. Especially when you're getting characters leaping around, and you're going, okay, so Adrian is now leaping 30 feet in the air, and you're going to watch him leap over you to there. And obviously, I hate to break it to the audience, but Adrian can't jump 30 feet in the air. It's not really.
Don't spoil the magic.
Quite high, but 30 feet's pushing it.
I hate to break it to the audience, but whatever car it was, was it my car you were driving at the end? Cannot leap. Big gaps in motorways.
Do not try this at home.
Oh my God. We'll get to that, won't we?
Yes.
So
was fun.
you mentioned props. I know that they gave you crutches, right? You actually had crutch, because that would be impossible to act out without having a crutch. If you're doing a scene that it requires you to fall back, jump, whatever, are you just using some sort of landing bag or whatever? Like
crash mat.
Did they ever use stunt doubles at any point?
No, we did.
Not for us.
No, Neil and I did a lot of the fighting actually together.
Right.
We did some of the fights when the Niflheim and the Insomniac soldiers fight each other. So we were doing some of that stuff.
And all the stuff in the airship and everything. There's lots of that. Although I'm trying to remember,
that was in Tokyo, wasn't it? And we were jumping off the platforms. Yeah, we had crash mats.
We did for that. Like the hard one for me was and here's a spoiler, so if you haven't seen this before, mute it for 30 seconds. The Regis death scene.
Isn't that beautiful? Look at that.
It's almost like you've never seen this film, mate.
I've seen it once with you.
I've not seen it for a long time, but yeah, the death scene after Glauca stabs him, I had to fall face first, as if I was all actually dead, and Adrian sort of threw me off the end of his sword. Problem is, we're wearing full head cams, so you've got sort of 9 inches of cage out in front, and I had to fall face first into a crash mat without smashing either my face or the camera into the mat.
Or the camera, yeah.
And obviously you can't catch yourself or anything because you're a dead body. So that was interesting. And repeatedly having to do that and just last second turning my head into the mat. But yeah, with props they tried to do a lot of it. So for all the Arden stuff, John actually had this gigantic big wing thing that he waft around while he's doing it.
And we had those massive weapons, didn't we? Hold them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the throne scene where the weapons appear, and we were all stood there holding them.
And they were wooden, I think, weren't they?
They were wood, yeah.
Which must have been really heavy. I mean, I guess that makes
like holding a scaffold board.
Right.
Yeah, the Glauca swords, the one they gave Adrian to start with, he sort of managed to pick it up and wave it around a little bit, and then went, you know what, I can't actually do what you're asking me to do with this weight.
Yeah.
It was about 3 meter long solid piece of wood, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they'd shaped it to look like the sword, but it was just a solid hunk of wood.
Wood, you'd think wood would have been the last thing to use for a weapon prop, but maybe, I don't know.
So they swapped it out for a big bit of plastic tubing, didn't they?
It was like a lightsaber, yeah.
Well, there's the Harrison Ford connection. Thanks for we gone full circle.
In the volume, going. Anyway, look at that! What a beautiful image.
I must admit, the lighting in this movie is really quite something.
Mm.
Oh yeah, this is the same with Liam and I preview.
So this is fun bits of behind the scenes magic, where obviously we're wearing, so the suits we're wearing, I imagine a lot of people who watch this have seen them before, but they're essentially like a sort of cotton wetsuit style 2-piece outfit. So you've obviously got no pockets or anything like that. You're supposed to be able to carry stuff. So I'm supposed to be carrying this pill bottle and take it out of the inside pocket. So essentially I just got stalked by a member of the crew, just holding bits of props that I would need to be able to take at different times, and then just put them back in and just drop them on the floor. So it makes it's quite interesting. You just got being stalked by someone with no markers on, so they don't get picked up.
Right.
Yeah, this was a fun scene. This.
It's funny because, like, it sounds weird, but like there are certain characters you see and like it doesn't look like Will, but it's Will. Like, that's weird. I don't know if like they keep certain aspects, maybe like eyes and stuff, but like it just is, maybe it's just in the facial expressions. I don't know. Maybe there's just something about it.
Eyes are the only things which they don't use.
Right.
The others are completely animated.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They have the reference videos from the facial cameras, but there's no real way to track them at the moment.
So will the camera like at least follow where the pupil is, and then they can create a fake eye over it, or is the eyes completely done separate?
No, I think it's all done separately, because obviously you can't
put dots on your eyes.
Exactly. Yeah.
You could try. Maybe they'll come up with a contact lens that would work. I don't know.
They might. But yeah, at the moment, as far as I'm aware, it's still not possible. So they're literally, so the cameras they have are just standard cameras that are just recording your face,
right? And
then they use those as references and model the eyes to fit with what the actor did.
So when they did your scans, were they full body scans, top to bottom?
Yes.
And is that a rather personal experience?
Standing there in my pants, getting photographed by strange men.
Like the way I'm like in my mind, the only thing I can think of a full body scan is I think when you're going through Heathrow, right? You're stood there like this. Like, is it a similar experience?
It is quite similar.
Slightly less. So they had patting down,
less touching,
right?
They had I think it was 168 SLR cameras, all connected in parallel,
right?
So that when they took, and they basically they'd worked out in their software all the distances, they knew exactly how far each camera was from the subject, and then they'd set it so the software would, when it triggered the photo, would trigger all 168 cameras to go at the same time.
That's got to be a lot of data.
Yeah, and then they used that data to build. The data was then fed through their software, which would then, because of knowing the distances, they could then build a 3D model from it.
Right.
So the facial ones, you're sat in a chair with a pole in the back of your head, so your head stays exactly where they're expecting. And then, as Adrian was saying, you have to pull numerous facial expressions and replicate this headshot, please. And you see this still from your audition tape. Can you do that one, please? And then the body scans, they kind of they expanded the area, pulled all the cameras out, reset it, and then it was exactly as you say, the sort of hands up, hands down, arms out, and they would just photograph, do the photos, and then build the model off the back of that.
So we have a scene here where there's a lot of people. How would they have pulled something like that off? Like, is that all those people just added? Was there just like a bunch of planks that somebody had to like just wander around? Like to be able, because there's so many, like Nix is interacting with so many people, right? It's not like he's just going around them. He's pushing them out of the way. He's,
I don't know. I don't
remember. Yeah, I'm trying to remember that one. I remember this scene. So one of the ways they do it is essentially you shoot the scene multiple times. So for this, we had, I think, 5 of us. And Will, were you playing Petra at that point?
I was playing Petra at this point, which is weird.
Will did the capture for Petra in that scene, and we had 5 of us then stood in a line. We did the scene and then moved to the side, and then 5 of us, we then redid the scene again, but a pace behind. So Will was still moving at the same spot, but we were then, another 1.5 feet, 2 feet back.
Right.
And then essentially they overlay the data. So Will's data, to an extent, matches, and then they've got 2 sets of unique performances to use for those for the groups. I'm not sure about the sort of the big crowds and the
maybe
protest
it was done
crowds.
In Japan the same way they did.
It may have been done in Japan. It may have been done, or Budapest possibly. But again, I would imagine that a lot of it will probably be CGIs, but the ones where Nix is interacting with people, it's probably that they've got a handful of people,
right?
And are reshooting scenes over and over again with the different people.
So the majority of the recording was done in England. So what was the purpose of the Japan trip then?
The stuff that we did in England was done on obviously before Zoom was a thing, on a sort of Zoom link.
Yeah, on a feed.
We were directed from Japan via a Japanese translator in the room. So we'd do the scene in the way that we thought they wanted it, and then there'd be a slight delay while it gets shipped to Japan, and then they would watch it and they'd go, no, do it slightly differently, and then that would get translated into English back in London, and then we'd have to tweak it. And that, with the traveling for all the Japanese contingent of the production, they just thought, do you know what, let's just bring them over here, it's a lot easier. So I think it was a ball ache for them to come over here and try and direct from over there. So I think they thought, let's just bring them over there.
Because some people came over. Didn't the producer come over?
That's what I mean. It was
Takashi came over, didn't it?
Yeah.
So we usually
came over.
We'd have sort of 4 or 5, a team of about 4 or 5 from Japan, who would be with us basically the whole time. So we had a localization guy, and then Rui, who was the project manager, Takeshi was the director, and then there were a few of the other digital artists who would come, and it kind of changed a bit. It was often the same guys, but there was a bit of leeway there for them to bring different teams. And when we first started, they brought a team of about 10 or 12, I think. And then when actually we don't need that, we can get away with. So what was then happening is they'd all come out for a couple of days, and then the majority would then go back to Japan, and they'd leave a small team of sort of 4 or 5 with us. And as Adrian was saying, yeah, we were using a sort of, I think it was probably Skype, and they were set up in a meeting room. We did this scene in
Tokyo, didn't we?
This was done in Tokyo. The other reason we shot in Tokyo though is logistics. The studios we'd been using were busy as well. They needed to film a bunch of stuff in January in 2016, and they couldn't get the studio space. I think Imaginarium were working on Marvel at the time.
Right.
I can't remember which one, but I'm pretty sure they were working on Marvel, possibly Star Wars by that point, actually, as well. So there was a whole bunch of different things going on. So they eventually were like, look, we'll bring you all out here. It's easier for us. We don't have to worry about getting the studio space in the UK.
So how long were you out there for?
8 days.
12 days, wasn't it? 8 days. 8 days. Yeah.
Right.
5 days of filming and then 3 days off in the middle, which was amazing.
So what kind of, like, if you had to percentage it, would you say split between filming in the UK and filming in Japan? What was the kind of split?
Probably 75% in the UK or so.
Yeah.
We reshot a couple of little bits in Japan, but the majority was scenes like, so the whole airship, I'm right in saying that the whole airship stuff was done in Japan.
Yeah, that was all done in Japan, all of it.
It was a lot of the last, sort of the closing bits. So the airship stuff, and then stuff towards the end. It was kind of filling in bits and pieces here and there and reshooting little bits. But yeah, it's about 70-75% was done in the UK.
Quite a bit then. And I think we've discussed this once before, but there's a huge challenge in that the fact that there's a lot of, I can't even imagine the gigs worth of data that they were trying to transfer. That must have been, even now that's a challenge to transfer that kind of data, right? So so the
shot in Japan,
the sort of test shoot that me and Adrian did before we started filming properly, which is the Regis scene I mentioned before, that was done as a test shoot to test out the equipment and see if it was possible to send the sort of rough render data to Japan along with the facial capture data quickly enough for them to be able to give us kind of real-time feedback.
Right.
And they did it. They did actually manage to do it. And I've no idea how. The links must have been insane.
Yeah, it must have been.
The amount of data they were sending back and forth.
Must have been some intense fiber line for that to be pulled off. Yeah. So you said all of the airship stuff was done in Japan.
Yeah. So this is one of these ones where
and all that stuff, all the scene, the Lunar Freya rescue, that was all done. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of those bits where it's like every other. There was 5 of us playing all of the different glaive and guards and etc. So there's, like every time it cuts, you're like, oh, there's us again. There's us again now. Oh, and we're playing that guard. And
like we had to explain to them sometime, Alex, that basically we couldn't be in that scene because we were beating ourselves up. So
we had been cast as certain guards and things, and and
they'd be like, "Yeah, well, you're doing this," and I'll be like, "I actually can't do that because Pelner kills those guys, so I can't kill myself, can I?" So it was interesting sometimes.
So I guess then in a scene like where John was, King Regis would have been talking to Arden, then John would have been on both ends of that. Obviously shot at different times, but...
So the only major one was the throne room. But for the throne room, we shot the main bit of scene, and then... we shot the main bit of scene with everyone, and then basically they kept John back to do the speech. You
guys must have been delighted to be able to not just, be in the motion capture, but to do the voice. I know that you touched on, that it was, you had a legal opportunity to do it and it all worked out. Like that's a big deal. And I know that Ray Chase, who voices Noctis in the main game, says that he's pleased that there's only such a small piece of Noctis, because if it had been any bigger, he thinks he probably would have been replaced with, a movie star or somebody that could, pull viewers for it. So,
yeah, I was incredulous that they kept, well, certainly my voice. I was just highly delighted to be able to do the voice and the motion capture and everything as a one-off. It just meant that you played the part. Just playing the motion capture is all very well, but it's not the full.
At what point did you know that you were doing the voice? Was it?
We were told right from the beginning that we would act it, and they would take a sort of a guide track dialogue. It would be recorded.
Sorry to cut across, Adrian, just this bit.
High percentage chance that we would be replaced, which we understood and accepted.
Liam looks like he's going to explode with excitement. Go on.
So Will probably remembers this scene. Just to cut across on a completely different thing. Me and Will at this, when we was its grip. This was a scene where me and Will had to stand opposite each other with the guys doing the bit. So I'm playing Clarice, and he's the sort of opposite number. And the way that line was being delivered, we just kept giggling. And so they kept having to stop because our shoulders were going
right
in that one.
Yeah, that was a bit. Oh, right. So, this fight, Neil and I did some of this against each other. So I played a Niflheim guard here, and Neil played Petra.
So again, another iconic Final Fantasy creature, because it's believed to be Ultros, right? So,
yeah, it is.
Either that or it's bloody familiar, just by chance. But yeah. So
no, it is Ultros.
When you're doing the behind the scenes stuff, and we see that in the recordings, and you're doing your voices, then at the time you didn't know that they were using your voices.
We knew that quite possibly they would use our voices, and I think it was explained explicitly from quite an early stage that they definitely wouldn't be using Regis's voice, because Sean Bean was probably going to do that.
Yeah.
And Luna, he was going to do Luna Freya, and who was it? It was Aaron Paul, wasn't it? They knew they were going to replace. And I thought surely some other guy in to do me, and they didn't. And I was so happy about that. It was just an unexpected bonus to be able to do everything.
Where did you do the recordings for the voiceovers? Was that in the UK?
London.
Yeah, so that was everything that we utter on screen here was ADR'd, was re-recorded.
Right.
Because everything that we did, everything that was filmed was just a guide track.
Yeah.
The quality of the recording wasn't good enough, and so everything, as far as I know, had to be re-recorded.
Yeah,
literally everything. Yeah.
From speaking to a bunch of voice actors, it can be quite a challenge to work with mouth flaps and get everything to line up. Is it easier when it's yourself? Does it make it any easier?
You kind of remember it, I suppose. You do remember it from the scene and things like that. So, but it's still not easy.
I don't think I've ever been happy with what the ADR ever done. Some actors claim to like it, and I know Meryl. I've been told that Meryl Streep loves it. She says it's a great opportunity to redo it or to invest something else into the line, which seems like a contradiction in terms, because you've got to say it the way you said it. But it's not the day you look forward to when you have to go in and do ADR, because it's so technical, it's so picky, and it's just, and you're on the little, you have to match your voice with what you see on the screen, and that's, you have these guide timing things buzzing across the bottom of the screen. I find it so stressful. I really do, because you're in a re-recording studio, which are charged out at horrendous rates.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pressure on you to get it right. So rather than having what you might imagine to be a more relaxed atmosphere, not in a studio when you're doing it, it's actually more stressful, I think, than doing it the first time.
You were fairly against the clock anyway, weren't you?
Yeah. It is so time pressured as well, because how many sessions did you do, Adrian? I did 2. I did 2 4-hour sessions to re-record the whole lot. It was and
that's quite impressive, really.
It's as he says, it is stressful, because you're getting these shots, and also when we were doing it, I don't know if it was the same for you. Not all of my stuff was completely finished, so some of the graphics weren't finished yet. So you're trying to work out what the lip flaps are doing in the stuff, even though it's still not quite there. Most of it was, but some of it you're still trying to sort of guess and work off the audio that you've got from when you recorded it. When we did the motion capture, it is very difficult. It's very stressful. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Golly, you can really see John Campling in these shots.
I presume that's another iconic monster from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so that's Ultros.
Ultros made its first appearance in, I want
4 or 6.
It's either 4 or 6, and now my mind has gone blank, and let's just forget we ever mentioned it.
I'm sure someone in
it's definitely
in the comments
in 6.
will tell us.
It's definitely in 6.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in many of the titles, right? And then obviously with the cartoon earlier, I never mentioned it at the time, but there's a Marlboro, and there's I think even the keyring might have been like the small version, like the Morbol one. So there's a lot of tiny little series Easter eggs here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, it was something they were very keen on all the way through. Was
there's Glauca, right?
Was getting in as many sort of little nods, not to sort of get in the way of the film as a whole, but just those little Easter eggs for the fans to spot. Like also, if you pause it very early on when Drautos and Nyx are driving through Insomnia, there's a whole load of different shops that have all got sort of Easter egg names and Final Fantasy names.
Right.
Things like the bank and I can't remember what the bank's called now.
Well, I know that there was the courier truck, which was based on chocobos. I think I saw earlier. Right? So there's lots of little
nods.
Yeah. Which, as a fan, that's the things you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
God, it's mad watching this again.
Now, did they give you a good rundown of the story in advance of filming? Or was it kind of something you learned as you went along?
No, we had the full synopsis. We had kind of, well, they weren't storyboards, they were advanced storyboards. I don't know what the technical name.
They had a film, didn't they?
They call it like low resolution.
Yeah, they showed us that film, didn't they?
Yeah. There was like a 15-minute kind of synopsis that was a mix of some finalized CGI. So like the opening bit of the city, they'd got kind of a still render of that, and then it jumped between sort of storyboards, artist renders, everything, and with voiceovers and things.
It was as comprehensive.
But having said that,
it could possibly give us.
Yeah,
it was great.
But having said that, there were also a number of plot points where we were sort of asking, well, how does this work? And they're going, don't know, we haven't written it yet.
That was.
And I think I did.
That's true. Yeah.
I think I've said this before. I loved my character and I loved the arc of him and I loved everything about him. But right from day one, I would find issues or inconsistencies, incongruities in my character or what I was meant to be doing, and they'd formulate some excuse, some explanation, which didn't really make a lot of sense at first, but you go with it. And then as the filming progressed and we got further into it, more of these inconsistencies seemed to manifest themselves. And initially I was frying my brain trying to reconcile all these things. And in the end, I just said, tell me which way you want me to say it.
Right.
Tell me where to stand. Tell me how you want me to say it, and I'll do it. Because
do you think that's a time thing, like the time pressure to get it done?
Well, it wasn't that. It was just, I don't understand this logic, and there's no time to discuss it. And this is your job. You know what works. I don't think this particularly is consistent, or this doesn't make logical sense. But it was my first go at motion capture, and you can't jump up and say this is rubbish. I'm not doing this.
Right.
You just have to go with it because it's their baby and they know what works. So, speaking from a personal point of view, you just have to throw your hands up and say, "Okay, I'm going with this. I don't get it, but this is what you want, and I'll just to deliver it. And if you're happy with it, then we'll move on." Because I think there were lots of inconsistencies, weren't there, guys?
There were some.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
and especially with the Drautos character, we never really got a sort of concrete explanation for Drautos's arc.
No, that was one of them, and the big payoff at the end. I didn't get that cathartic moment, and I tried to get it in, and they said no, it's just don't do it like that. and they said, well, I said, can we try and do it like that? And they gave me the old bullshit. Yeah, we'll film it this way, and we'll have a look at it. And whenever they say that, they're never going to look at it. It's just going to
I'm right in saying they removed quite a bit. Like there was a lot of stuff that you filmed that didn't make it to the final movie, right? Like I feel like Liam, at some point on stage, you mentioned there was a big monologue. Was there not that you filmed?
So we reshot some stuff. So because
they made it shorter. That's what it was.
Yeah. So the issues we were having, obviously, as we filmed, we kind of got the script in 3 parts. And whilst we were recording and filming the first part, they were still writing parts 2 and 3.
Right.
And then, obviously, it was written in Japanese as well, and then translated and localized into English, even though English was going to be the lead language on it.
Right.
And so we had trouble with this because it was kind of like the guys doing the localization was like, I don't know how to say this. Essentially, this line that takes 10 seconds in Japanese, to do it justice in English is like a paragraph. It's a full wall of text. How do we? And so there'd be times where we'd actually try and we'd sort of semi-collaborate and try and work out how the hell we're going to say this stuff. So the bar scene,
that happened a lot, didn't it? Yeah.
So the bar scene that we said about how I was saying, it was basically the first thing we actually filmed at all. We then ended up coming back to it and reshooting the whole thing because originally the interaction regarding the pills between Nix and Libertas was much, much longer. And I had a big monologue about.
Right. That's what I see.
That's the bit you're thinking of.
Gotcha.
And it was, I see my dead friends and I see their faces when I go to sleep, and essentially, and these pills are the only thing that gets me through. And it ended up getting completely shot because they were like, it's lovely. The problem is we need this scene to be 2 minutes long and it's currently 3.5.
Right.
So we've got to cut this stuff down.
Just going back to the footage, obviously we've just seen a fight scene. Adrian, when you were filming stuff, obviously you had two sides to your character. Like the armor is very heavy. It's meant to look like we already talked about the weapon was really heavy when they did it with wood. Did you have to adjust the way you performed? Did they tie weights to you? Did they do anything to make it so it was easier to present that?
That particular scene, which we just seen the beginning of, and we will see the end of when I'm about to dispatch Regis, was the first scene. Was actually the test sequence that Liam and I did. So Liam was playing Regis here, and I was really ill that day. Or rather, I wasn't ill that day. I was just coming into what was going to develop into a 2-week flu, and I really struggled to get through that fight. And I had to do all the moves. And I had to throw myself against the wall and land on these mats, which is no problem for me because I've done all that sort of stuff before. But when you're just coming into, heavy bout of heavy flu, and you ache and it was horrible. But in terms of the armor, no, there wasn't. I don't think I knew exactly what the armor was going to be like.
Right.
Maybe I did. I don't know. But it wasn't. It wasn't a big deal because, one of the misconceptions people have about armor, certainly medieval armor, this is the scene coming up here, is that it's so heavy and you can't move. And this whole notion was, its genesis was brought about and exaggerated by the 1940 film, Henry V with Laurence Olivier, where you see a French knight, or might have been an English knight, being hoisted up onto his horse in his armor because he's so heavy. And that's ridiculous because that never happened in real life.
Right.
You've got to be able to fight. And these medieval warriors, these guys that wore knights, obviously it's metal, but they trained every day in full armor to be able to get onto horses, to be able to get off horses, to be able to be highly maneuverable and highly trained killing machines. So those notions of, it's so heavy, that's a misnomer, a misconception.
Right.
Certainly in medieval times, and certainly in a modern futuristic thing like Final Fantasy, that armor would have been of no weight or no consequence at all. So there wasn't any kind of adjusting acting to do there. Well, that's the way I saw it.
This is something we've touched on before, but this scene obviously is a scan of John, but it's not actually John, right? So this scene was you and Adrian.
It was. So as we were saying, this was the sort of tech test shoot that we did.
And it was just a case of like, you do the shot and they're like, actually that's fine. So we can just use that. And then they just moved on. That was it.
Yeah. So they shot it all, and they sort of, obviously Adrian was playing his part, but the rest of us had all been sent the script and told, look, you probably aren't, you may not even be playing these parts, but just learn this couple of pages and come in, and we're not going to be, it's not for anything. It's just to test out the tech and see how it works and make sure that everything's good.
Right.
And then we I think it was the second set of shooting we came back in for, and they were like, actually, we really liked what we shot in that test, and so we've cleaned it up and we're keeping it.
So it was actually one of the first things that was, well, it was the first thing that was shot.
It was literally the first thing we ever shot.
Right.
I don't know about Adrian. I hadn't seen a script beyond the sides we were sent. We were sent sort of a handful of pages for the scenes we were going to shoot. I hadn't seen a script.
We didn't know the story or anything.
We knew nothing. I didn't even know who my character was. I didn't know who I was playing. I knew I was playing Regis in this thing, and he was a king. And that was it. Just no backstory.
Touching back on what Adrian said about how, like, talking about the story arc and stuff, like, the people who made this, I'm sure they had experience in movies, but a lot of them are game developers. And usually in a typical Final Fantasy, you get about 40 to 45 hours. And actually a lot of, there's many positive reviews, but one of the most common negative facts was that it was too much fit into too small of a time frame, right? But unfortunately, with a story that is in depth as this, really, you would have needed a 3 or 4 hour movie, even to cover most of the things that you'd want to, right?
Yeah,
I think that's probably the challenge. There's a lot of things to cover.
There's a lot of story to cover, and a lot of characters. Sort of a lot of the sort of secondary glaives, have a handful of lines and are in 3 scenes and then disappear again, and are actually quite important to the plot, but don't really get much.
And the issue's not just limited to the movie; it's the game too. All right, that's why there's a game. That's why there are patches. That's why there are additional episodes. That's why there are books now. Like there's so much lore to it. There's so much story that needs to be filled. So I imagine fitting it into an hour and 50 minutes must have been a challenge in itself.
I think so.
I feel like you mentioned at some point that it was meant to be longer.
Didn't they have 6 hours of footage, Liam? Didn't they have 6 hours of footage? And Steve told us that they had to reduce it all and everything.
Yeah. And we were reshooting scenes because they were like, the problem is we need it to be, the running time needs to be less than 2 hours. And at the moment,
would that be a Sony thing? Would have Sony been the one to, because they're the ones who put the money to get it out there, right?
I think they.
Your moment there, Liam, where you did the speed 2 jump in the car.
No, not yet.
Oh,
that's coming later.
Okay.
It's I think I'm sure there were bits and pieces that there were definitely bits from the script.
When the movie was being worked on, Sony weren't even in the picture to start with, were they?
No, I think, but Sony came on board. It was definitely before we finished. I think they'd already.
I mean,
they were
Square
at least in
and Sony
talks with them.
Had a very close relationship, so
yeah. So they kind of were already tied in. So there's a lot of the sort of logistics and I wouldn't be surprised if Sony turned to Square and said, "You can't release a 4-hour film. No one's going to go and see that."
Well, it worked for the Titanic. You just throw in a boob and you can put 4 hours on it. There you go.
Draw Adrian like one of French girls. But yeah, to be fair, most of what we shot ended up. There were some bits and pieces. And there's some smaller bits, and there were bits from the scripts as well that we kind of, while we were filming, they would go, "Actually, we're not going to shoot that. We're just cutting that. We're cutting that." And it was like,
that would happen quite a lot. Remember, we'd have sides, and then the next day we'd come in and they'd go, "Right, the sides you got yesterday, forget about them. Here's the new sides, you know, and we were like,
cut that half a page and rewrite this bit.
The further you got into it, did you get more visuals? Like, did you start to see outfits, uniforms, weapons, that kind of thing?
So we saw a lot of it from the start, kind of the
concept artwork.
Yeah, the sort of overall artistic direction they had nailed from the start. So when we had it was after our test shoot, but before we started filming, we had like a meet and greet with the cast and some of the crew, and the director and producers and the rest. And at that point, they were showing us quite a lot of concept art, and this is what it's going to look like. And the majority of the art direction is the same. So they had the ideas of the main building in Insomnia where the crystal is housed is based on the municipal building.
Yeah, city, isn't it? City building, or it's a building that exists in Tokyo.
In Tokyo, yeah. Weirdly, it was opposite the hotel we stayed in. Japan.
Yeah, well, that's what. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? I thought that. Yeah.
So they had a lot of that stuff kind of already down, and the outfits they changed a bit, but the majority of them, like we had a fairly good idea that there were going to be these sort of hoods with masks built into them, and these are the weapons we're using, and all that sort of thing. It was quite weird seeing the concept art with our faces on as well, because they'd got. So by the time we did that, they'd had our scan data, and the concept artists had put our faces onto the characters already. So it was that was.
Did you ever see the concept art before your faces were added? Like what they had envisioned, what they would that would kind of been cool to see the difference between.
No, I don't think I did. I don't know if Adrian did.
I remember that first day, the sort of familiarity introduced when we were told what it was. I remember because I as I've said in previous, I didn't know what Final Fantasy was or anything. I didn't know what a big deal it was. And then we had that first introduction day where we met the producers and the director and the other sort of staff, and we were given that sort of synopsis, that 20-minute synopsis of the arc of the film and the arc of the characters. And we saw our rendered images in costume. And I couldn't get the smile off my face. I just thought, oh, I love this. Because we knew that they could potentially do anything with our images, with our the data of our faces.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything to me very much, as far as I could tell.
My understanding of the scans is like they really zoom into they can capture like every single mole, every crease.
Absolutely everything. And it was me, and they gave me a great costume and a great arc and a great story and good dialogue. And I thought, oh well, this I'm so lucky. So I was very, very happy. But not as lucky as I sort of. I didn't realize how lucky I was because I didn't know anything about Final Fantasy. I didn't know what a big deal it was. I know Liam was, in
a nerd. You can say it. I'm a nerd. Yeah.
Yeah, Liam did explain it to us a bit. I wasn't aware of it, and he did sit down one day. I remember talking to him about it, and him saying, "You do realise what a massive deal this is."
But isn't it your niece who's big into Final Fantasy?
Yeah. So I couldn't tell her. My niece. Remember, we went to the Square Enix cafe, and I got those. We had those. What were those massive vinyls, didn't we? And I got all of the cast and crew and directors and everyone to sign it for her, and I gave it to her, but I couldn't give it to her until basically the film had been announced, and then I had all these goodies to give her from Square Enix cafe, and she couldn't believe it. But yeah, that was I'll never forget saying, when we did the premiere, and they said, "What's your favorite, game to play?" And I put Assassin's Creed, and you looked at me like you did.
Yeah, big group of us. Who I can't remember what channel it was. It was a Final Fantasy channel was interviewing us as a group, and Will was like, they were going, so as a group, what's your favorite video game? And Will that. Assassin's Creed is like, oh, God's sake, Will.
Honesty is the best policy.
Oh.
Yeah, the interviewer didn't quite know what to do then. And on with Liam. Let's carry on.
It was.
So, you said that you added up like the number of characters you did. So how many people do you think were involved? Like when I've seen all the behind the scenes, there doesn't seem to ever be any more than like 7 or 8 people in gear ready to go.
Well, I've subsequently come across loads of people on other jobs, and they go, "You're Captain Troutus, aren't you?" And I went, "Yeah, I was on that film. I did some minor thing." And they probably didn't do anything, but they were the facial capture
right.
of some character. And so there are many. I mean, I don't know whether they all got an IMDb listing or what, but I've subsequently come across many people who have been in the film in some way, probably just a facial capture.
Are there a lot of legalities involved with that? Because I assume they don't own your face. Like
they do own your face.
Yeah. Yeah. You sign away your rights for them to use your face. It's limited to tied into this property.
Right.
But as we've seen, like some of our facial data was used then in Comrades. And specifically, rather than for Comrades, it's not Libertus's face; it's my face that they used for stuff. And then obviously our characters have appeared in other things, and they've sort of based it off of our faces. So you do kind of sign away the rights to them. Oh look, Greg getting his comeuppance.
Yeah,
but on a sort of. But as you were asking about the number of people involved, weirdly, I did a job with a guy and spent the morning going, "You look so familiar," and I can't work out. Have we met before? And all that. And then it turned out he was a facial scan for one of the Glaive characters. Because on a sort of gone.
I imagine like most of the background stuff, they don't need a lot more than just a face, right? The rest can be done just using a computer.
Yeah. So that was the first point I knew that I was up for a major character, was when I did the scanning, because I was told so little. I don't know if Adrian had the same experience, but I was told so little at various stages. Mm-hmm. So I went for the scanning. I didn't know who my character was. I didn't know a name. I didn't know if he was sort of a major character, minor character. I didn't even know if I was doing motion capture for it or just scanning or anything. And so I turned up and they were like, "Oh, well, we're doing body scanning with you. So it's definitely a main character. But beyond that, we've got no idea." So all the smaller ones, it was just the faces. I think all the sort of main named characters were full body scan.
Right.
But as you say, the minor characters were all just face. On a sort of day-to-day basis when we're actually filming, I don't know, was it 13, 15 actors maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And that
maybe
includes
sometime on some of the big days. Yeah, some of the big days.
That's literally everyone. So obviously more in stuff that they shot in Budapest and things. But on a sort of the majority cast, there was about 13, 15 of us. And that includes the kids who appear right at the start. So there was a lot of doubling up. And it made sense. It was nice. It worked really nicely because, and I've definitely said this before, but it meant that rather than, you come in for your scenes and that's it, most of us were on set most of the time. So if they were filming for a week, the majority of us would be called in for 4 of those 5 days rather than just being called in for, a morning of one day, because that's the only bit they're doing with you. So it was really nice as a cast. It was really nice because it meant we got to spend a huge amount of time together and get to know each other really well.
We were always in the green room anyway, even if we weren't filming that day. They'd always have us in, didn't they? They'd be like, right, we hope to get to you today, but we want you here anyway. So,
and then they'd come and get
much all the time.
Yeah, and they'd come and grab you and go, "Oh, we're going to shoot this. We need a couple of people to stand in for this at this point. You two come and do it." And they'd just come and grab us from the green room, and off we go and go stand in the corner for half an hour while they shot something. And again, it was like when they were filming stuff, if they had people in the background, they would try and get as many bodies in the background as possible to try and flesh out the scene and reduce the amount of kind of fake graphics that they needed to use.
Right.
These are the Guardians, aren't they?
These are the Kings of Lucius.
Yeah, Kings of Lucius.
Which is the Knights of the Round, basically. It's again another
equivalent of it's another kind of
it's another
fan service.
And again, it was another one they deliberately wanted to do.
I'm going to just assume Adrian didn't have to do that.
We're coming up to the part of the film now where, for me, as I remember it, I kind of lost interest as a viewer. Certainly when we get into the major fights, when we're jumping over buildings and everything, obviously it's got interest for gamers, and they probably like to see that, and that's what they want to see most of. But as a viewer of drama, of cinematic fiction, as an actor, when you can't see their faces, well, you couldn't see my face because it's behind a mask or armor, or it's in such a long shot, you just turn off.
Mm-hmm.
You disengage from the drama, and it becomes just like watching a video game. And I can't comment on whether that was a good thing for the patrons of Final Fantasy or not. But for me as an actor, as a watcher, a viewer of drama, you just think, oh, you've lost me now.
It certainly differs from a typical movie. There's no
characters bouncing around on
well, I think
in a similar way that I feel to all those Marvel films. I think it's ridiculous, which I know is not a popular view, or even perhaps even a mainstream view, but it's just an old actor whinging.
it is. Old man shouts at cloud. Yeah.
Anyone share that view at all?
It's a difficult one because I think it's fulfilling the purpose of what it's set out to do.
I can't really explain it because that's what it is. It's a video game, but I think you could have retained interest for longer, for a wider audience.
I think it's also it's quite an Eastern. It's got a very sort of Eastern feel too. So that if you look at a lot of anime. And those sort of things, and even the sort of live action versions, again, they are quite similar to this. And you touched on Marvel as well, like the big battle scenes in the superhero stuff. It's very similar, but a lot of the anime and things like that are this
Man
sort
of Steel
of
was nuts. I mean, they're just.
But a lot of the time, you do get these sort of epic battles where things are cutting and flipping, and
I'm generally not a fan of Marvel movies either. Like, I just generally don't enjoy them. However, the difference with the Final Fantasy series I find is, one, I don't consider this a standalone movie. I've never thought of it like that. I imagine it almost like even though I know it is a movie, it's like the boldest cutscene of a game at the beginning of a game. But I think that something that really works for this movie is the soundtrack, and that's the same with everything that Final Fantasy touches. The soundtrack in this is phenomenal, and I think it makes a big difference. But I totally see where you're coming from. Like, I think if I didn't know Final Fantasy, if I didn't know the game as a standalone, it would be it's not as easy to get, engrossed in what's going on.
Mm.
I mean, we're into it now. This is what I'm talking about. It's just characters, just figures, isn't it? Fighting in the middle of a massive,
but it's cool. To be fair, that's the point of it. The point of these kind of things, as Alex is saying, like video game cutscenes are like this.
Yeah, it's
story
meant to be the epic moments.
Bits.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right?
Payoff.
Like, because the movie, a game, this is what it all comes back down to: is a Final Fantasy game is 45 hours. The cutscenes are the epic moments that maybe take up an hour and a half in total. This is an hour and a half of epic without the cutscenes in between. Sorry, the dialogue scenes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why this, from a regular movie perspective, it's just not gonna appeal to those people. It's definitely a niche thing.
Like this sort of scene in a video game, it's like, it would be like the end of Doom or something. It's the last level. It's the final boss. You've put 20 hours into it. You are invested in these characters more so than in a film where you've had them for an hour. So there is, it's exactly that. It's that final shot of, it's the cool bit with the characters you know and love doing cool stuff.
I would love in the long term, maybe they'll do it. Maybe, like, I think this movie needed more time. I think 3 hours would have allowed much more character development.
The Schneider cut, is that what we're saying?
The Schneider cut.
Yeah, I think I agree. An extra hour, because you could have a lot more of the character stuff, and there's a lot of the stuff that we talked about while we were filming it, and backstory stuff that we talked about. Yes, obviously we said about some bits we never necessarily got the answers we were looking for in places, but there was a lot of stuff that we talked about that isn't in the film and was kind of there for us as the characters, but was never spoken about or seen in the film.
So they gave you some backstory to help you portray the character, but we can't get that, right?
And there's a lot of stuff that you kind of a lot of the stuff between the sort of Libertas, Crow, and Nyx trio, a lot of that we sort of discussed what the relationships were there and how they'd all grown up together and they knew each other. But again, that's not really something you only really see. There's the couple of speeches here and there, and there's a few little bits of interaction, but most of it is taken up with the battle and with the build up to the fight, rather than the sort of character.
So even though Kingsglaive is like the prequel of Final Fantasy 15, Kingsglaive almost needs its own prequel.
Its own prequel, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way how there was the Brothers.
The Brotherhood.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something we sort of said on the time. We'd love to have explored these characters, and because this is very much sort of the end of a war. It would have been great
the
to
beginning
be able
and the middle,
Yeah, and it'd be great to see, what happened in between. Why and how did Drautos / Glauca become, like, at what point did he turn? Where did that come from? How did he get to the position he was? Like, he's meant to have been there for essentially over 12 years, I think, isn't it? So, like, that's serious long game there, but there's not really.
I did point this out.
Yeah, there's never a clear answer as to how Glauca managed to essentially fight on both sides of the war at the same time, or what he did, or why he switched sides, or and it's the same with a lot of the glaive. Like the idea is that they're all refugees from outside of
the city
of Insomnia,
right?
And as the war has moved through towards the city, these villages and things have been evacuated,
right?
And that all the glaive are all non-native,
right?
Yeah.
So the native characters all have British accents. None of the glaive have British accents because the whole point was that we're all supposed to be. It's little things like that were never really explained and explored.
That's the challenge of modern day cinema. You can't do that in 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's ignoring the plot for a second. From as far as CGI goes, this is gold standard. Like, you do not get any better.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's incredible.
This is like the lighting, just everything. It just, I mean, like the half mask. It is absolutely incredible.
Here's your favorite bit, Adrian.
Yeah.
The physics bit.
I've got to say, I'm so impressed with it.
It's amazing. I remember because
it is a great feat of production. And
now, did you have to recreate this in some form?
Sorry.
So, with the car here, are you leaning on something?
Yeah. So again, we had the bucket seats with the steering wheel,
right,
and then a platform behind. So all this bit where we're fighting on the roof was all on a platform, and basically lying on a platform and, sort of using the platform to fling ourselves around as if the car's swerving around stuff.
There we go.
It's definitely possible. Definitely doable. And obviously I just
with
get
you
up
on the roof.
fine.
Yeah.
I chuckled loudly when I saw that in the cinema. What a hero.
Hell yeah.
That thing's still coming.
That car held up real well. And it just shows buy a good brand. No, then again, the airbags didn't go, so I don't know what that says about the safety rating, but
that would be amazing if it lands and just Luna's goes poof.
Director's cut.
Yeah, the details.
It is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah.
It is beautiful. I remember when they first started showing, because obviously the test shoot stuff, they'd had the footage longest. That was the first kind of finished footage they showed us. And I remember just being blown away by it. It is absolutely amazing. And also, it kind of changed how we were shooting as well. Because with a lot of, especially when we were filming this, a lot of motion capture was had to be kind of more expressive than normal filming, because
I read that there was a fine line between over-expressing and under-expressing. You had to exaggerate some stuff, right?
Well, that was kind of the initial brief, because most of us hadn't done it. Obviously, Will had done plenty, Neil had done plenty, but myself, Adrian, we hadn't done motion capture before. So we were kind of very much learning on the job. And we were being told, right, one thing with motion capture is you kind of need to be more expressive than you would be on normal film, because it won't pick up the tiny little nuances that
because there's only so many dots on your face, right?
Because so we started off shooting bits and pieces with being that sort of not quite theatre, but over expressive,
right?
And then they showed us the first bit and you're like, oh, actually no, we don't need, we can tone that right. The tech is much further on than even they thought when we first started,
right?
And you toned everything back down. It basically it did go back to just being on camera and that sort of level.
Great watching it again though. Those Kings of Lucius, they were phenomenal, really. They were. See,
I would have preferred more extensions of scenes like this.
Remembering all this now.
because scenes like this, like Adrian says, there's a lot of expression. You can see faces. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of, you're actually getting a bit of backstory, you know? It'd be interesting to sit around the table of when they were deciding how to cut this movie and who decided, you know, the action percentage versus story.
Yeah, I think
I would imagine Sony had a lot to do with it. They're probably thinking about, you know, how much money can we make back on this movie, right? Because I imagine, what was the budget of the movie? Do you recall off the top of your head?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
I'm sure it's on IMDb.
Probably, almost certainly. But I think it's a weird one because obviously it wasn't made as just as a film. It was obviously made as part of
a bigger universe,
a great big multimedia project.
Yeah.
So I think to some extent, bits and pieces were cut out on the basis that they could cover it elsewhere. And some of it has been, you know, the sort of comrades bits where they kind of tied up some bits and pieces with the glaive. But other bits just fell by the wayside. And that's kind of what happens with everything. You always lose some bits and pieces. And I think the fact that it was sort of a bigger project dictated what, and their sort of target audience as well. I think in a way, this film was very much geared up for the video game market.
Well, it was the platform in which they launched the game, right? Like that was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah. And the reason they went with Western actors for it is because they wanted to appeal to Western audiences, and obviously there's already a reasonable following. Obviously, in Japan and everything, there's a massive following for Final Fantasy, and in the West there's a reasonable following. But they were really with this film, they were really trying to push that to get people interested and hook people in.
Not to mention, like, from a generation perspective, 15, it's been a long time since a major Final Fantasy has been released. 14 doesn't count in this, you know. So
13 was
ages ago. Yeah, it was like
10, 12 years before, something like that.
Something like that. So, you know, for most people, this is the only Final Fantasy game that they will experience in their childhood.
Yeah.
And the 15 following is huge. So this cutscene, you do a fair bit of walking about, but there's a tiny space. So is this something that's just repeated over and over again?
Yeah. It was weirdly awkward shooting this as well, because I had kind of a pile of stuff to climb up.
Right.
But she had to get so far in the time I climbed up to where I stopped, and then she'd turn back round. But I had to time it perfectly, and obviously she was walking away from me, so I couldn't see how far Amanda was getting as well. And I was trying to climb up this stuff to hit a mark as she was hitting her nightmare. And just think, if Luna had taken me with her, it might have ended differently.
Well, God, that's the first time we've seen that in 5 years. And I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed that.
It's so good.
I thought the graphics were great. The performances were good. That was just, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for, you know, sharing your insight. It's always interesting, you know, as a viewer to see how it all comes together. And, you know, I hope, God, it would be wonderful if one day they just released all the footage so everyone could see everything, see how it all comes together.
There's a lot of...
That must have been a big deal when that came out to people that are interested in it, because I'm, you know...
It had been years since we'd had a Final Fantasy movie. The last one was Advent Children, which you either love or you hate, in my opinion.
I do like Advent Children. I've not watched it in a long time, but I do like it. But again, it's got the same issues.
That was, and it's directed by this. I didn't appreciate that movie.
But again, there's a lot of these big epic fight sequences.
Yeah.
But it's the same director again, so that comes into it.
Did all three of you go to the premiere when it happened?
Yeah, in London. Yeah.
Just maybe briefly, while we're on the credits, just touch on that. Like, I assume pretty much everyone was there. That must have been an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was
Sean
really
Bean
cool.
was
I was
there, wasn't it?
Were you not?
I was in Budapest.
Oh, you were away. Yeah, you were filming. You were away filming.
Yeah.
All the important people were at the.
Well, at least they didn't have someone halfway through the movie going, "Oh, this is shit. I can't even see my face." Like, so
No, actually, so the premiere was amazing. The premiere was really cool, and it was it PlayStation Access were sort of hosting the event.
Right. Where was it to in London?
It was the Picture House on Shaftesbury Avenue.
Yeah.
So nice sort of big Art Deco cinema. Lovely place. It's a really, really nice building. And so PlayStation Access were running the night and had all sorts of events and things, and we were doing all sorts of interviews. And for most of the cast, it was the first time they'd seen it. You hadn't seen it before, had you, Will?
No.
So
I know you'd seen it in LA.
I saw it in LA, but then again coming back and seeing it kind of, because that was me, Andrea, Rui, and maybe a couple other people. So there's only like 5 of us in the cinema for that one. Whereas obviously when we saw the premiere, it was full, completely full.
I think movies like this work a lot better on a big screen.
Yeah.
Like there are certain movies that I think when you watch, you want to watch it on a giant bloody screen. And a movie like this, I think it has a lot more impact. A lot of it's to do with sound too, right? If you've got like every beat bass dropping and you can feel it in your chest, it makes a difference.
Definitely. But yeah, because with Adrian, because me and you saw it at the Odeon, they did like a one-off screening across the UK. And so the two of us came. And we had that wonderful moment where one of the guys who was coming to watch it recognized me, because I think we'd interacted on Twitter a few times, and he was chatting, and then Adrian came over as well, and then we were sort of about to go in, and the guy was like, "Oh, can I get a picture?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can." And Adrian's going, "Should I come in as well?" And the guy was like, "Should you?" And Adrian, so it's this point, Adrian just talks himself out of being in a photo, going, "No, I'm just his mate. I'm nothing." I'm going, "You want him in the photo?" And Adrian's going, "No, I'm nothing to do with it. I'm literally just going to watch Liam and support."
Well, but was he in the photo?
No, he took it. I think. Didn't you take the photo? Yeah.
I don't remember, mate.
Adrian was like, "No."
It's slightly different than that. He didn't want me because I didn't know who I was or what I was.
He'll be kicking himself now. He'll be kicking himself now.
I didn't.
He was kicking
That's
himself
because your face is covered by a mask for 50% of the movie.
I didn't want to big myself up, so I thought, okay, well.
It reminds me of the moment when we were in Toronto, when we went to watch Distant Worlds, and John was stood up on the balcony, and then he was just stood there proudly, and then everyone went, oh, and then everyone looked up, and then there's John Capley, and then it was like 2 hours to get out of the venue. Good times. Well, look, thank you guys. I appreciate you sharing your insights with us, the good and the bad. And it's I'm sure a lot of people will find this interesting to go back and watch. And I personally, I love the movie. I mean, and so do tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, because, in the recent poll that we did there, it was voted the best Final Fantasy movie. Which I think a lot of people, offense, were surprised because the kind of following 7 has, like it's huge. So that really is quite the impact. So thanks for sharing this time with us. It's been interesting. Maybe if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a prequel. maybe 5 to 10 years from now, they go, let's do it again.
No, they have. They've said that's it, haven't they? They said they're not doing it anymore.
I mean, to be fair, like pretty much everyone who was involved has been sent off in different directions now.
Yeah, everyone's gone and moved on, and
Rui's not there anymore. Actually,
No, she went to Google, I think. I think she went to Google.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people who were involved, who were sort of heavily involved in making it, have moved on to other companies and other things. I think it was an insane project to be working on from the sort of backroom side. I know, talking to people, that they were like, yeah, my wife doesn't know I'm working on this. And even within Square, I think we were like 2/3 of the way through filming before the majority of Square actually knew it was even happening.
Well, I have a round table with the 2 community managers in a week, so I'll ask.
So yeah, find out.
I'm pretty sure everything was. I think everything was pretty under wraps until quite late in the game. Yeah.
So they had things like, Ruiz, the project manager, was having to essentially lie to colleagues about what they were working on, and so all these different groups thought that this group was working on something with another team, and every team, so they had to keep it completely quiet, and it was complete under wraps.
It was quite an experience, wasn't it, when we walked onto the Square Enix floor and the animators saw you and Adrian, and they kind of went, "Oh."
No, it was a great project to be involved in. It was so good.
I enjoy how the credits have special thanks and then they have big thanks. I was just waiting
super big thanks.
Yeah. What's the difference?
Limit thanks.
Never seen that before. Special thanks, big thanks, and then it'd be like super duper thanks. There we go. God, 2016. Holy shit, does time fly? Oh my God.
I know.
And now you've got this, and this was the build up. This was introducing the game, basically, wasn't it? Interesting.
I feel like the Prompto model changed
a little bit, in the eyes.
A bit from this, As actually, same with Noctis as well, actually. Noctis changed. The other two seem pretty close, but
Noctis's nose looks different.
Yeah.
But it is like it is. If you consider it like an opening cutscene to a game, because that's basically how it lines up. That's one hell of a bloody opening.
But yeah, basically.
Well, the weird thing is, though, you play the first sort of chapter, and then the film happens.
Yeah,
and then
you do get this short cutscene. They do take a piece from the movie.
They patched it in, didn't they?
Yeah,
because it was like initially there was like a tiny little bit.
It needed it to explain what the hell was going on. Yeah. And I think by the time I played it, when I played 15, they had patched it in, but it kind of really glossed over it. Yeah, I think if anyone's watching this,
your dad's dead, mate.
If anyone's watching this and hasn't played it since it released, it is worth going back and playing it again, because they've added quite a bit since the original release. So.
And the Royal Edition stuff as well. There's a lot of extra bits and pieces.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. And we're going to sign the stream off. So take care. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Alex. Cheers, Liam. Cheers, Adrian.